Hey folks, welcome back to the Contrarians. This is another episode of our worst album edition, where we're actually going to be picking a worst album from a band. Today we're going to be looking at the discography of Cheap Trick, and we're going to be looking at what we agreed on is their worst album, but is it Contrarian? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think. Remember that we got Patreon for anybody who wants to subscribe there. We've got lots of exclusive content going up there all the time now. We also have a Ko-Fi in case you don't want to subscribe on a monthly basis. But I'm going to throw it over to Martin. But quickly, we're talking about Cheap Trick, major band from the 70s. They had 3 massive platinum selling records in a row with Dream Police, Heaven Tonight, and In Color. They also had the massive Budokan album. They took a little bit of a dip in the 80s. They came back with a big record with Lap of Luxury. And then they put out a few more albums. And I'm going to throw it over to Martin so he can let us know what his pick for the worst Cheap Trick album is, which you might be a little bit surprised or not.
All right, yeah. So I'll add to that that sort of look at the band. I mean, I actually saw this band live for the very first time on tour, backing up Kiss on the Love Gun tour, 1978. I guess that would have been Love Gun, but I saw them in Montreal on a family vacation, believe it or not, supporting Kiss in Montreal on that big tour. When you open up Kiss Alive 2, that was the show, right? So that was cool, and loved that album. Already knew the band, so they were a huge band. As Marco says, they were big in the 70s. But then what happened is they had a bunch of records that didn't certify right in a row. Next Position, Please. And what was there? Standing on the Edge, The Doctor, all in there. And then Lap of Luxury had a big hit on it, The Flame, which sent that record platinum. So they had this second resurgence, but it didn't last. They had Busted. They had Woke Up with a Monster. I think essentially this band has 2 really great periods to their career. That great 70s period where, most of those records, as Marco mentioned, went platinum, and they were produced by Tom Werman, had a really cool sound. It was like a power pop / hard rock sound, the big live album. But yeah, this was their debut. So this is kind of interesting. This is their debut. And the next time after that run in the 70s, which I think Next Position, Please is a great album. Todd Rundgren produced it. I think that's their last best album for a while, a good album for a while. But then what happened is they came back with a second similar looking self-titled album, Cheap Trick, in 1997 on Red Ant. And this was a fantastic album, and this started the run of all the great albums they have up until this date. Very, very prolific band with Special One and Rockford and all these records as we move forward. More live stuff and cover of Sgt. Pepper and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of studio albums started with this album. So yeah, our choice, it's I won't say what it is yet, but the idea here is that it actually could be a contrarian choice. We'll let Marco kind of give us a little bit of stats on that, but there is kind of that run of records right there in the 80s up until, let's say, 1994. Woke Up with a Monster. That run of records is where the picking is always kind of ripe for picking what would be the worst Cheap Trick album. And so the album we are agreeing on is actually Busted from 1990, and we'll let Marco talk about Busted a little bit first.
Sure, yeah. So like we were talking about like what albums are the worst from Cheap Trick, and there are a couple that are up for contention. Martin suggested Busted, and I actually agree with him. I am going to mention that in all the stats and all the research that I've done, it's not always chosen as the worst. There's one album that always gets picked in every single ranking list as dead last for everything, including things like statistics, like ranking lists that I've seen on a bunch of websites, even set lists. So what's interesting is the statistics of how many songs a band played live and which songs from which album, and which albums are represented more live than other ones. And on that list, of the 19 records that Cheap Trick has studio records that Cheap Trick has put out, Busted came in at number 21, which is funny because there was categories like other that did better than Busted in their like live set list statistics. Yeah. The only record that ever beats Busted in terms of like live set list representation, being at the bottom of ranking lists, charting lower, selling less, being picked even by like worse as user reviews or critic reviews, is the record The Doctor. So I'm actually a little bit contrarian in that I kind of like The Doctor. It's kind of maybe a little guilty pleasure. It should have been called The Frankenstein, I think, because it's when you listen to the song structure and even the production, it sounds like a bunch of kind of pieces that are put together. But it's kind of messy, but there's things I like about it. And I'm going to get into what I don't like about Busted in just a moment. But the reason why I agree with Martin is things that like The Doctor kind of reminds me, like the production is a little bit messy and it is kind of wacky and electronic in parts like this, but I find it like super interesting. Some of the songs are kind of annoying to listen to, and some of them kind of sound like a mess. But there's certain things that are going on that like I actually kind of enjoy. So, there are guitars in this. There's heavy guitar on The Doctor. There's heavy guitar. The vocals are kind of theatric. The song The Doctor, but there was some stuff going on. Like the production almost sounds like a melting pot. Like they kind of threw a bunch of stuff in together, and like you got this really weird production. But I like Are You Lonely Tonight? Take Me to the Top was a little more generic, but Good Girls Go to Heaven kind of reminds me of stuff that they did earlier on. Same with Manipulator, kind of reminds me of Gonna Raise Hell. So like there's things about The Doctor that I actually kind of like, but with Busted, I just find like there's definitely an issue with the production. Rick Nielsen's guitar is like you can hardly find Rick Nielsen's guitar on Busted. Like just the way that it's produced, Robin's voice is like right out there, and his vocals are great on the record. But like with the instrumentation, I find the guitar is kind of, I don't know if it's buried or if it's missing or something, but I find a lot of the songs with the classic albums like In Color and Heaven Tonight and Dream Police, the ones that I had mentioned, they're very accessible to a lot of fans of like rock music, and even maybe metal fans might find them more accessible, and maybe even pop fans. And I think the reason is because there's a lot of stuff going on those early records. Like the guitar is driving the record in a lot of cases. Like when you listen to In Color, the album kind of starts out very heavy and rocking. Then we get into their biggest radio hit ever with I Want You to Want Me. There's interesting things, like even the drums are more interesting on things like You're All Talk from like In Color. Heaven Tonight is another record that's very guitar and harmony driven, like a High Roller is one on that one. Like, and so on. And so when you go back to Busted, and there's something going on with the production where Rick Nielsen's guitar is just like, it's not there in a lot of ways. Like there are like guitar solos and stuff like this, but I just find that they're not very guitar driven songs. And I feel like they were trying to be more accessible and more poppy, but they were losing elements from the early records that made them more interesting to a wider base of fans. And I think they kind of failed with this record. Now, I don't think all of the songs are terrible. If I look at the track listing, I like the song Busted. I like it's interesting. I just did the Move record review episode with Looking On, and they did a Wizard cover from Roy Wood, Rock and Roll Tonight. I know some critics, like All Music, said they neutered the song, but I kind of disagree. I didn't mind that performance. I don't mind the song Big Bang, but I mean, other than that, I think they were going a little too poppy, a little too like pop ballady kind of direction with Busted. Can't Help Falling in Love is another like kind of pop power ballad, and there's just too much of that stuff going on. And I think the production, it just sounds like very like hollow, and they're losing things that made Cheap Trick on the earlier records. So All Music called the production Shimmering Skyscraper production, admittedly does the group no favors, neutering Roy Wood's Rock and Roll Tonight, turning its swing into a stiff martial march. At least it's warmer and less reliant on cold synths than that garish misfire, The Doctor. Here's user reviews from All Music. So user reviews, Cheap Trick at its lamest and blandest. They were obviously trying to please the record label, but ended up annoying their loyal fans and the record label. Maybe 3 songs that are okay. Here's another user review comment. There are some really good songs on this. The problem is that they went too slick with the production in an attempt to capitalize on Lap of Luxury. There's another comment. Walk away, had to make you mine. You drive, I'll steer are third rate. The title song is almost embarrassing. There's no reason to get it unless you're a hardcore fan. That probably sums up the way I feel about the record. You know, like there's maybe a couple of okay songs. I find the Doctor a little more interesting, even though that seems to be dead last in every ranking that I've seen. It's nowhere near any of the classics like Heaven Tonight, you know, and Heaven Tonight had the California Man track on it, which was another cover that they did. And what's interesting too is when they seem to cover those old tracks from like The Move and Wizard and stuff like this, they do them a little heavier, and I kind of like it because they're not just recopying the song. But I find that with Rock and Roll Tonight, I just find they lose a little bit of the soul, but I don't think it's a bad cover. But I think I've kind of gone on a little bit, and let me throw it over to Martin. You tell me why you don't like Busted, and tell me if anything I said was.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Maybe the sober choice would be the Doctor, but to me, I kind of don't hate the Doctor either. I mean, I didn't pay it a lot of attention at the time, but when I played it to prepare for the show in conjunction with these other later records, I liked a lot more of what was going on. It was more creative. It reminds me of their Alice Cooper Flush the Fashion in a way. And I love Next Position Please. But so this record, so you know, you start with a title that's negative. It's like, oh, the band is busted. They're busted, flat broke, whatever. It's negative right from the start. And that goes from, an album called Lap of Luxury, where it's like, oh, they're all rich now. They're removed from the world of us fans or whatever. And it had that very lush album cover. And this album cover looks just like the Lap of Luxury album cover. So Lap of Luxury went platinum. This one didn't certify at all. It would be the last for the label. And then they follow it up with Woke Up with a Monster, which is another one that makes the list as kind of negative. And it's got kind of a negative title and that creepy clown thing on the cover. But, that's 4 years later. So they must have really annoyed the label with this because they're off the label. And the next album, they had this big deal with Warner Brothers and it didn't work out. And that album is not that well loved either. But I love what you say about the production on this. So this is the second in a row done by Richie Zito, who's known for being, the pop producer. He did Bad English in '89. He also did, what did he do in '90? Heart Brigade, which is badly produced as well in 1990. And this doesn't sound like Bunny Carlos drumming at all. The drumming is very behaved, very like super blindingly high sheen on the sound. I made a few notes about the songs. So Back in Blue, you start off with a little pun, haha, Back in Blue. Horrible backing gang vocal melody on that. This album is so corporate in so many ways, and that's one of the ways, with one of these awful backing vocals. Melody and guitar that don't sound like Rick. I Can't Understand It, another horrible gang vocal melody on that, which is just, Pop-Tart corporate gang vocal stuff. Wherever Would I Be, Diane Warren, written ballads. So here we go with the song Doctors Right. If You Need Me, crap melodies, modulation, keyboards, Can't Stop Falling in Love, horrible pop ballad hit, although they wrote it. Busted. I put down old-timey rock and roll, flash dance music. It sounds like heavy Huey Lewis or flash dance or movie soundtrack music, right? But not a terrible melody. Walk Away is like a waltz time ballad with Chrissie Hynde on it. You Drive, I'll Steer. Again, my notes say corporate Aerosmith, Heart, stripper hard rock with a bit of a Cheap Trick melody. When You Need Someone, crap ballad. Had to Make You Mine, a Beatlesque Cheap Trick song. Not bad, actually. It's very Beatlesque, this one, with Birdsey guitar. They wrote this one as well. Rock and Roll Tonight, the Roy Wood Wizard cover. I agree that I think they more or less neutered it. It's not that great. And it's really just a rock and roll boogie song. So it's nothing super creative from the Move. It's just this boogie song, right? I mean, the fact that they're covering Roy Wood Wizard, you think, wow, that's going to be really creative. But no, it's just a boogie rock and roll song that totally fits into this mandate of making this corporate rock. So, I mean, is this a contrarian choice? I don't think it's that contrarian, but it is interesting how, as your stats say, the Doctor is going to come lower. The Doctor, one of the things about that album is that goofy album cover that broke stride with the fact that, they had this thing going where they often would put, the two pretty boys on the cover and the two kind of fun funny haha guys on the back cover, right? But yeah, I swear that album cover had something to do with that album not doing great either, and it is very experimental. But yeah, these ones are not experimental at all. They're just like cynical and corporate, and seem to be all about the money. And in this case, seem to be all about trying to follow up. There's your Busted album cover, following up. The Flame more than anything, or all over Lap of Luxury. Here's one of the other kind of corporate-y ones, and there's your Dream Police, an old classic, Dream Police, and there's One on One, and we haven't done a regular Contrarians on Cheap Trick. I'm wondering what my pick would be, and I'm wondering what your pick would be, and if we'd even have a Contrarian choice. But I really put this one super high. This is an underrated album. It did not certify. It didn't go gold. I just think it's great. And like I say, produced, engineered, and mixed by Todd Rundgren. So, what else did I have to say about, not really much else to say about this record. I mean, it literally is like the sister album to the equally bad Lap of Luxury. But, I almost felt like we couldn't talk about Lap of Luxury because people would come back and say, oh, but 1 million people liked it. It went platinum and blah, blah, blah. Right. But that's just the power of a hit single. And it's a corporate power ballad at that. So it's, I always put Cheap Trick and Heart and Aerosmith together in going this route and not doing it particularly well. And I've talked to the Cheap Trick guys over the years after the fact, and they regret this period. I mean, they don't regret making the money they made off of having a second wind, but they are not fans of these records at all. The production, the playing, the song choices, the outside writers. This is a band that does not need outside writers. I mean, in fact, Robin Zander is an outside writer for other people, and so is Rick, actually, for that matter. He had the two heaviest songs on Rick Derringer's Guitars and Women from 1979. They were written by Rick. Two awesome classics. Check those out. But yeah, there you go. I think this would be the worst because I think there's at least a little bit of creativity in some of these other ones. And I just find zero creativity across any of this. And as you say, the production is highly, highly irritating. So there you go. Our Contrarian choice. Anything else to add, Marco? What do you think?
Yeah, actually, funny, a couple of things that I agreed with you on. I have in my notes here, the Doctor reminds me of Blackout Period, Alice Cooper. So it's funny that you mentioned that. And I also have in my notes about Had to Make You Mine. I put, I liked it, reminded me of classic rock, almost Beatle-esque, probably my favorite, and the production didn't bother me, which I think is probably the biggest issue I have with the record is just the production. Because even when you go back and listen to like In Color, like the production sounds very clear to me, So it's like the performances are good and the production's good. So things are just kind of working on those albums better. And I mean, even when you listen to like the title track, Heaven Tonight, there's keyboards on it, but Heaven Tonight, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like a brooding rocker. There's keys on it. It's kind of eerie. There's nothing like that on Busted, So you go back and you find really interesting things in the older stuff, and you find interesting stuff on the Doctor that there's nothing really interesting about Busted. So it's just kind of like a standard kind of poppy rock ballady record that kind of doesn't really do any favors for anybody, like the one user review said. Like you tried to make the record company happy, but you didn't even really do that, and you made the fans upset. I think we agree on a lot of things, and even with the Doctor. But let's see, where do you put this? Like, how would you rank this out of 10?
Boy, I think I would give this a 2 out of 10. For the Beatlesque song on it, and possibly, I think the title track is salvageable. What else? There's really not much else. I can't understand it. Is not terrible except for that the gang vocal thing on it. But it's 2 is about as much as I could grab out of this record.
It is a fail to me, so I can't rate it higher than a 5. But at the same time, it didn't super offend me, so I would probably give it a 4. So if you and I were meeting in the middle, that would be a 3 out of 10. And on Dream Police, they had Rock and Roll Tonight, but Writing on the Wall is almost like a better version of Rock and Roll Tonight on Dream Police, and that's an original song.
Yeah. Well, a point to make. I mean, just to follow up on your talking about ballads. I mean, the fact of the matter is this band was so good at writing mellow songs in that golden period in the 70s, and they've done it over and over again on later albums like Rockford or the Cheap Trick album. So they know a great melody. And I think with Cheap Trick, the problem is that they kind of maybe let the money talk, or the fact that they need a big career, or maybe they just kind of like let people talk them into things. But I feel like they are absolute masters at writing a great mellow song melody that actually still has some sophistication to it. And that sophistication, there's no reason to think it would take any of the commerciality or accessibility away from it. So they can write good, smart ballads. So they don't have to do these dumb housewifey Diane Warren ballads.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, is like you listen to those old records and like there's stuff that's poppy but still more accessible, like Southern Girls from In Color. But the guitars are meaty back then, and I think that's what they're missing on Busted. Yeah. They're almost missing, like what would you call that? They're missing like an edge to their music.
Well, the edge is missing, but I guess what I'm more referring to is the fact that they're writing really mainstream, obvious chord changes for their melodies, and I don't think they necessarily do that in the golden period or the second golden period that starts with 1997. Whether it's a heavy song, a power pop song, or a ballad, they know a sophisticated melody, and they could worm that melody into all of those genres, effortlessly. And like I say, I don't think it takes away from the commercial appeal of them. So why bother doing the obvious and just putting out something that could be on a Bryan Adams album or a Heart album or Aerosmith 9 Lives or just Push Play or any of those records, or New Country for that matter. I mean, New Country bleeds into this idea of these housewifey, saccharine, primary colored melodies. And Cheap Trick doesn't have to do that. So it's just annoying that they did do it at this time. So let's wrap it up there. What do you think?
Yeah, you're way more sophisticated in your reviews than I am. But
well, I don't know.
Busted.
I just think that's I think we've covered the ground on this record and this idea, and yeah, I don't want to go back, but I mean, literally, I think this and Lap of Luxury are essentially a suite of songs that prove all these points. So let's wrap it up there. And I love to hear what you guys say in the comments below. Let us know. I mean, it's been gratifying to us to see a lot of agreement with some of our contrarian choices. Obviously, this is a worst album choice. So obviously, there's usually a lot more heat in the comments when we do a worst album episode, but I can't see a lot of people throwing a lot of heat at us for this. This is not that contrarian a choice, but it's interesting. We'll see how the Doctor fares in this, and I'd really like to see how Woke Up with a Monster gets commented upon, and Standing on the Edge and Lap of Luxury. So there you go. Thanks again for listening. We will see you again next time.
That's it, dude.